Hello, boys and girls. Today we are going to go over subtracting fractions and mixed numbers with like denominators. As we go through this lesson, keep in mind the strategies and the concepts you have learned in the last few lessons. Specifically, I'm talking about unit fractions. Remember that a unit fraction is one single unit or a single part of a whole that has been split. This is going to be the basis knowledge for this lesson. So let's get started. So here's our first problem. Look at the unit fractions we have in the example here. We have 4/8 minus 3/8. We are getting rid of the same number of unit fractions from our first fraction based on what is being taken away from our bottom fraction. So we're going to repeat that action, and now we have subtracted 3/8 from our 4/8. And what we have left over is that 1/8. So there is your reminder about unit fractions. So let's get in to another visual here. So this visual representation we have here is 4/9, and we're going to be subtracting 1/9 from our 4/9 here. So we're going to eliminate the same number of unit fractions from the top fraction as we have in our bottom fraction, which is 1/9. And what we're left over with is 3/9 here. So let's repeat the steps. Step 1, we subtracted the numerators. We're allowed to subtract the numerators because in both of our fractions, the denominators are like. They're both 9. So that makes it easy for us because all we have to focus on is subtracting the numerators. 4 from 1, which gives us 3. And then we keep our same denominator because our original problems both had the same denominator. Now, adding on a step here, we are left with 3/9. 3/9 can actually be simplified into 1/3. And how we do this, simplifying fractions, is we find that greatest common factor between 3 and 9. The greatest common factor between 3 and 9 is 3. So then we're going to take 3, divide it from our numerator and our denominator to simplify our fraction into 1/3. Easy enough? All right, so let's try another problem here. Now moving on to mixed numbers, we have 3 wholes and we have 3/7. So we have 3 and 3/7 minus 1 and 1/7. So going back to our original steps, the first step we're going to do is we're going to subtract our fractions. So just focusing on the fraction part here, we're going to subtract the same number of fractions from our bottom number as we are from our top mixed number. And what we're left over with is 2/7. So now that we have subtracted the fraction, we're going to move on over to the whole numbers, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Subtract the same number of wholes from the bottom whole number from the top mixed numbers, which is 1 whole, and we're left with 2 wholes. So our final answer would have been 2 and 2/7. So let's go through these steps again with a different problem. So in this problem here, we have 2 and 5/12 subtracted by 1 and 1/12. So in this problem here, we're going to focus once again, step 1, on subtracting those fractions on the right-hand side. So we're going to look at the fractions, and we have 5/12 minus 1/12. Since our fractions on the top number are larger than the fractions on the bottom, this is going to be easy for us to subtract. We're just going to focus again on those numerators, subtracting 5 from 1, and we're left over with 4, keeping our denominator the same. We have 4/12. Now we're going to focus on subtracting our whole numbers. So we're going to be subtracting 1 whole from 2 wholes, and what we're left over with is 1 whole number. Now we're going to apply step 3, which is simplifying our fraction. And since I know that 4 and 12 have a greatest common factor, I'm going to use that common factor to simplify 4/12 into 1/3. So my greatest common factor between 4 and 12 is 4. So I'm going to divide the numerator, divide the denominator, both by 4, to get my answer of 1/3. But a reminder that we're going to make sure we keep our whole number of 1. So our final answer is 1 and 1/3. All right, let's try another problem. So we have 3 and 1/5 subtracted by 1 and 3/5. So using our same steps, we're going to subtract the fractions. But looking at our fractions, we see that our top number has a smaller number than our bottom number. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to regroup. So we're going to take one of those wholes from our 3 wholes, and we're going to actually split it up into our unit fraction, which is fifths. So we've traded in 1 whole for 5/5. We're going to take those and put them on over to our fraction side so that we can easily subtract our fractions here. And now we have changed 2 wholes into 3 and 1/5. We've changed that into 2 and 6/5. So going back to step 1, we're going to subtract our fractions first. So we're going to subtract the same number that's on the bottom to the top, that's 3/5. And we're left over with 3/5. Now we're going to employ step number 2. And if you remember, step number 2 is subtracting those whole numbers. And since we have more whole numbers on the top, we have 2, and we have less on the bottom, 1, we can just easy peasy subtract 1 from 2, leaving us with 1 whole. And our final answer is going to be 1 and 3/5. Now, step 3 tells us to regroup, but luckily in this problem, we don't have to regroup. All right, so now let's look at subtracting larger mixed numbers with like denominators. So just looking at this problem here, I'm going to employ my very first step, which is to subtract the fractions. So without the visual here, just kind of using my own brain, I can see that the numerators are going to be easily subtracted because 15 is a larger number than 8. So I'm going to subtract those two to get 7 in my numerator and keep 20 in my denominator. Now I'm ready for step 2. Step 2, subtracting the whole numbers, I'm going to be focused on subtracting 25 and 8, and I'm going to get 17. Now I'm going to think about step 3. I have 17 and 7/20, and I don't think there's a greatest common factor between 7 and 20 because 7 is a prime number. Therefore, I don't have to simplify this one. All right, so that ends the tutorial portion of our video here, but I'm going to walk us through a couple more examples of problems for practice. So my voice is going to be moving a little bit faster this half of the video, so if you need that slowed down step-by-step instruction, go ahead and rewind back to the front of the video and go through those same 3 problems we just did. All right, so let's start with this problem here. We have 4 and 5/6, subtract 1/6. Now, since we have those common denominators, all we really have to do is focus on those numerators. 5 subtracted by 1 gives us 4, and we keep that denominator. And then we focus on our whole numbers. We have 4 and 0 whole numbers in the bottom number, so we're just going to carry down our 4. So our final answer is going to be 4 and 4/6. However, we know that there is a greatest common factor between 4 and 6 that allows us to simplify this problem. So our greatest common factor is 2. We're going to take 2, divide it by our numerator and our denominator to get a fraction of 2/3. Add that to our 4 wholes, and we get 4 and 2/3. All right, next problem. We have 8 and 1/8 subtracted by 3 and 3/8. So going to step 1, we're going to subtract the fractions and regroup if necessary. I can easily see here that my numerator at the top, 1, is not going to be easily divided by 3. So what I'm going to have to do is change one of those whole numbers into 8/8. So I'm going to rename this to 7 and 9/8. Magic change that fraction there. Now I can go right back to step 1 and easily carry out this problem. So going back to my numerators of my unit fractions there, I have 9 subtracted by 3, which is going to give me 6. Carry down that denominator. Step 2 is going to tell me to subtract the whole numbers. 7 subtracted by 3 gives me 4. And step 3 asks me if I need to simplify my problem. And I know that there's a greatest common factor between 6 and 8, and that's 2. So I'm going to divide that fraction by 2 to the numerator and the denominator to get 3/4, a simplified fraction. And my final answer will be 4 3/4. And that's all for today. Thank you.